As the playoffs get closer and closer, people are naturally talking about what teams they're expecting to do really well in this year's playoffs. And I feel like one team among the many in this discussion have gone a little under the radar. This is a team that everyone acknowledges is good. I don't think there's a single person who would say they're not. They're a team that maybe some people think borderline contenders, but either way, a team we all acknowledge is good. At the same time, I still feel hasn't gotten quite enough credit. I don't believe that this team is taken as seriously by the majority as they should be. This is a team that I think has a good chance of upsetting a few teams people would consider much better. And I would not be surprised at all if they made a deep playoff run. The team I am talking about is the Cleveland Cavaliers. With the NBA playoffs right around the corner, now is the perfect time to check out this video's sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy. For someone who is new to daily fantasy, I could not be happier with the app's easy layout and experience. It is just you versus the projections. Select 2 to 6 players and pick whether you think they will get more or less than their set projection. Get them all right and you can win up to 25 times your money. PrizePicks is also introducing something new and exclusive to PrizePicks called reboots, which essentially protects your pick from injuries. If a player you picked gets hurt in the first half of a game, those picks are rebooted. Essentially, injuries cannot ruin your entries. And what's great for you is that if you have not downloaded PrizePicks already, first-time users who use my code RUSTY will get an instant deposit match up to $100. So if you put in $50, PrizePicks gives you $50 and so on. So click the link in the description to download the PrizePicks app and use code RUSTY to get an instant deposit match up to $100. Thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. Now, like I said in the intro, I don't think the Cleveland Cavaliers are a team that anyone considers bad, so maybe dark horse is a little bit of an exaggeration, but either way, you know, just a vehicle to talk about how good I think this team is. I'd say a majority of people would consider the Cavs to be contenders, but I think in the case for almost everyone, there are definitely 3 teams ahead of them coming out of the East if they were to pick. And don't get me wrong, that's like the right take, but it feels like people are being a little too dismissive of the Cavaliers here, almost like they're just throwing them in like, I guess. And really, I think they have a real shot of looking just as dangerous as some of those teams above them. Now, as far as why I think so highly of this team going into the playoffs, there's really 2 factors. The first is the Donovan Mitchell playoff factor. Playoff Donovan Mitchell, playoff D. No, that doesn't work. Either way, Donovan Mitchell rises to a superstar level routinely in the playoffs. While he was not very good last year, in the 2 years before that, he was just absolutely electric in the playoffs. And the ability to elevate his play to that level really makes me confident in them having that superstar element, which you really need, generally speaking, to win a championship. But the second thing, something I'm going to be explaining in far more depth, is I think this team is designed to upset teams that people view as top dogs above them. In particular, 2 of the 3 teams above them, I think they are built to upset. Now, those 3 teams, of course, are the Bucks, the Celtics, and the Sixers. And of those 3, the Bucks and the Sixers, I think the Cavs are designed to upset. The Cavs are the perfect team to stop an interior scoring threat, whether it be Joel Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo. This is thanks to their insanely great defensive bigs, those 2 being Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. Take a look at the games that Giannis and Embiid played versus the Cavs this year. There's a little bit of a mixed bag in this, but I do think there is a point here. Now, Giannis actually has 2 great games against the Cavs this year, but in neither of those games did Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley play their full minutes. They both got injured in either game and missed a key chunk of time. But even though I do give that excuse for the good performances there, Evan actually gave him hell entirely by himself in the 3rd game of the season. Yeah, Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley didn't get full time together really against Giannis at any point this season, just about, I think, 15-20 minutes at the most. But overall, Evan Mobley managed to lock him up. As for in their third game versus the Cavs, Giannis shot 6 for 18 and finished with 16 points. Now in the case of Joel Embiid, he had a 36 and 18 game on good efficiency against just Evan Mobley. The second game, he had a solid performance, even though he did shoot 9 for 21. And in the last game, he had 19 points on 6 for 16 shooting. Obviously, there are mixed results there, but I think the fact that those two, or at least Evan in the case of Giannis, this team was able to create bad performances, pretty bad performances, for those two players with their defense. I really think that the Cavs defense can bother these two, who are probably two of the three most unstoppable scorers in the entire NBA right now. They can bother them enough to genuinely disrupt the offense to a degree that can win the Cavs multiple games. As much as the Bucks have made strides to not live and die by Giannis, they still kind of do to some extent. The Bucks are 4-3 in games where Giannis shoots below 40% from the field. Obviously, that's not a negative win percentage, but the 57% win percentage there is a far cry from the 74% they average otherwise. Don't get me wrong, Giannis could end up having a bad day and Jrue Holiday and or Chris Middleton end up saving the day. That's very well possible. But I think if regularly in a series you have the Bucks needing Jrue and Chris to make up for a lack of good play from Giannis, then ultimately you're winning that defensive assignment. If you're making those guys the real primary shot creators, the real ones generating the offense, even though they're pretty good at it themselves, it's not as good as when Giannis has it going. So ultimately, you win there. At that point, the Cavs are making the Bucks play how they allow them to, and that's definitely the right position to be in. I think the same could be applied to Embiid if they play the Sixers. Jarrett Allen can do a good enough job defending Embiid one-on-one. It's not going to lock him down by any metric, but he's definitely not a mismatch by any means. And then Evan Mobley will be ready for him in the paint to bring help defense, which will force Embiid to be pretty much entirely in the mid-range, which he's still very good at, but keeping him out of the paint, keeping his free throw attempts low, that kind of stuff, it really slows him down. And they will be able to swarm him and make him feel like he has a little space to work with. And we've seen both in the case of Embiid and Giannis, they often struggle with passing out of double teams and having just a lot of pressure on them all of a sudden. So that could force turnovers, and then that leads to offense. But there is a noteworthy hole that exists within this team's defense that I can't ignore. It is quite easily my biggest concern for them going into the playoffs, and that is their lack of perimeter defense. This is why I don't like this team's odds against the Boston Celtics at all, because the Boston Celtics, of course, are a far more perimeter-oriented team than the Sixers and the Bucks. Where the Cavs excel in front-court defense, they very much lack in backcourt defense. To give credit where it's due, Donovan Mitchell has clearly put in more effort defensively this year, and maybe that will translate well enough on the playoffs that it's less of an issue than I think it probably will be. But either way, still not a plus defender, nor is Darius Garland, and they're both pretty small. Donovan Mitchell is bigger than his height would suggest because of his wingspan and all that. But either way, they're not very tall, they're not very good defensively, and they're not very hard to get by. Now, obviously, still having a very strong interior defense is going to prevent them from being a disaster, but ultimately it's just going to be teams shooting over chairs. And I do worry that while you will be able to slow down a Giannis or an Embiid potentially, Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton, or James Harden and Tyrese Maxey will be able to pick up the slack. As I mentioned previously, it's better to have it go that way than not, but it's also a problem that James Harden and Tyrese Maxey would have such easy opportunities to score given their matchup. Same for Chris and Jrue. So after Garland and Donovan, off of the bench, you're not getting electrifying perimeter D from Karis LeVert or Cedi Osman. Again, they might do a passable job, but nothing that great. They only have two players who can defend well on the perimeter. Those two players being Lamar Stevens and Isaac Okoro. The problem comes on the other end of the floor because if you're playing either of them, you're pretty much accepting that one player in your team's offense just is not going to be guarded because Lamar Stevens and Isaac Okoro are the type of players the teams leave open in the playoffs. I know Isaac has shown signs of shooting better. I think there's been times where Lamar Stevens been all right, but trust me, they're getting left open, and I don't think they're going to prove teams wrong if they do play. So you're taking a huge offensive hit by making that defensive adjustment, but say that does work, even then you've only got one good perimeter defender out there with two other poor ones. So you're not sitting that pretty. Ultimately, you have to play Garland and Mitchell a ton of time, and that hole is just inherently going to exist. Don't like how that sounded, but whatever. Now, as previously mentioned, the other factor is Donovan Mitchell. While last year's playoffs were rough for Mitchell, we know he has shown an ability to elevate his play a ton. So you combine his capability of single-handedly carrying offenses to playoff wins with the factor of their defense and how it is built to upset two of the top three teams in the conference. I think this team upsetting a top dog wouldn't even be the biggest surprise in the world. It might be to some of y'all, but to me it would not be. Hell, maybe they could even win the whole damn thing. I'm more likely to bet that they, I don't know, push the Bucks to 6 or 7 than actually win. I still think everything that I've said, I would take those other three teams above the Cavs, but I think people would be a little too shocked that the Cavs did this because on the right day, they compete with these teams just as well as anybody. Or maybe because I made a really long video giving them a ton of praise right before heading into a playoff setting, I just jinxed them and Cavs fans will forever hate me. In which case, sorry.